I want you to take a look at something here. Remember back in 2009, June 2009, when President Barack Obama went to Egypt and he spoke with the people of the Arab nations, and it was a pretty historical event. During the time, he was making history based on his presidency, inheriting the economic crisis, and this is something that was pretty significant in itself. How he was received in Egypt, um, and he actually visited the pyramids, and he had a tour, and it was actually one of the things that no president before him has ever done. And I thought it was pretty significant. At the time, it was the same time I was going to court itself, dealing with something I was to defend in federal court, which I did. And I was mentioning how the grid, the layout, was all existing. It was an energy that could not be destroyed, it could only be transformed. And I mentioned how the streets, like Orion, how they played a part in this layout. And all this is being significant because of the fact that these are things that exist or had existed. For instance, the face that was created, a triangle that was turned into the pyramid, was someone that once existed, and his image of going to be Osiris in the afterlife. And this layout created the triangle that, with the Orion inside of it, actually pointed to the same layout as Orion as we see in this illustration, back to the constellation showing the shaft, which was the house itself. I mentioned was the king's chamber, and on the other side was the layout was the B-52 bomber at the airport, Orlando International Airport, which turned out to be 436, the street that comes into the top, which I said the 4, 3, and 6 is 13, the 13 stars. This number 60687 represented the time frame which I first got on an airplane going to Houston, Texas. And together showing the layout, it created basically the eagle and the pyramid on the back of the dollar, the reverse side, the obverse, and the Great Seal is called. And you can see based on just the way it looks on the image, how they all comes to play as far as it's the same thing. I mean, you can take that for what it's worth, but it is what it is. And I said I didn't come across any of this until after my experience back in August 11th, 1995, 3:30 in the morning, when I was awakened at that time, and I was living in the middle house there with the basketball court and the blue car in the yard. That started the ball rolling to just basically dealing with one thing about the world being in the opposite direction, and this message about a pyramid, and I didn't have anything else other than that. But it was on August 11th, 1996, about the same time, 3:30 in the morning. I was standing in the yard next door, where you see the brown car out with the one-car garage, and I was having my friend Myra was staying there, and at that time, that blue car that's in the yard next to the basketball court, you see, was in that yard where the brown car is. I had moved it because the car had broken down, and I had rented the house up to someone else after Myra moved out. I had to move the car over and put it in my yard. But I was sitting on the back trunk of that car when that thing came down, and if you see next to the brown car, you see this like a bush next to it on the yard. It's a clean palm, and that's where the thing came down, and it almost touched it. Like you see the height of the pole there, and it came down about that height, and then it dropped, and then it did a U shape going back up, and then it went right over the top, the roof of that house. I thought because the door was wide open, it went into light, but it didn't. It went right over the house, and towards the direction where the Millennium Mall is at now, area. It was during that same period that I decided I had to put this sign up. That was from the experience from from 1995, August 11th, 1995, and it stayed with me. And it was after that, the experience that I saw that object come down was a month later, was September, that I noticed the way the houses were laid out, like the Orion and the stars and the pyramids. And here was my dog Hunter, which hit me after that was have a dog. His name's Hunter. I had him since 1991, and Hunter is another name for the Orion. all these things were coming at me at once. And it wasn't until at that point I just was dealing with Orion. I had nothing else other than that until these faces appeared. And when I noticed the faces that were in the area where I lived at, and it was like, unusual to have so many billboards up in an area. I've traveled around here and haven't seen that many billboards up in an area at one time, saturating like that. And when I found out they were, where they were, I noticed that this is what the situation was. You're dealing with someone who actually once lived, and the soul doesn't, cannot be destroyed. Your energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be transported. It was transported to that layout, and the energies of it still exist. And this here we go again with the layout as far as the Orion, because that's where Osiris in the story itself goes when the dead king went into Orion, which I didn't believe any of that because I was not studying that. I had no knowledge of it prior to this experience. So that's what made me pay more attention. And here we go where the houses were, how the same thing points back to the houses. The three houses were right where where the Orlando's at. And here we go, the Osiris again in the stars as a man. Now what I want to show you was the continuation. It was like here we got President Barack Obama Parkway in Orlando. President Barack Obama was become president until 2008. And now we have Parkway, President Barack Obama Parkway in Orlando. But the thing about it, it's not just anywhere that this place is at. This Parkway has been placed. It's been placed right where I say the energy still exists. His name is placed over the top of the pyramid, where I said that grid exists. Just where the area where you would say the eye would be the rays of the eye. The rays coming from the sun rays, knowing it's like this is something that is being watched. Okay? Now the name, the Parkway could have been placed anywhere, but it wasn't placed anywhere. Here we go. He was the first president to ever visit the pyramids, the Great Pyramid also. So is that a coincidence? You can take it for what that is worth. I know it's not. Here we have, just recently we had the whole thing about his birth certificate, this long form, this birth movement about him not being born here in the United States. Here we got New Coatus announcing the birth of, or a new beginning. Okay. Now we have his name in the area where you would see where I said in 1996 where this existed. His name over the top. Now, I said it before, and I'm showing you. If I had this earlier, if I'd known this earlier, I would have shown it earlier. But I mean, it's the timing itself is what it's all about. And like I said, when I was going back to when I was a child, and my experiences when I said that I had encounters when these beings would come inside of my room early in the morning, and just something I knew that when I went to Florida, it was the only time it didn't happen. And here I am again, and standing here on the left side, my brother's in the middle, and a new cousin we just have met, James Roberts, sitting down, squatting down with a fist on his chest, and Jerome is looking back towards us. But at that age, I was still having that experience, and it wasn't until 1996 when the answers to the situation of me having those visitations and the actual finding of the little black object on me that removed that